you mentioned also obesity, and I know that often goes hand in hand with all of these things. Is that an abnormal digestive process as well, or what's going on there?
So that is a can of worms.
Okay.
And so obesity,
that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, it's all of these things. You certainly have the environmental component. You have a genetic component. There's somebody's socioeconomic status. There's behavioral elements, psychological elements, all basically. If you could think of the broadest categories in the world,
Yeah,
that's what those are. So not super insightful, but yes, there's certainly, digestion certainly plays a role. But again, just to, I think, further wrap up why we even talked about diabetes in this case is just, again, these medications that we're going to dive into very much were rooted in treating type 2 diabetes.
Okay.
And so they have this effect on weight maintenance. And because of this effect on weight maintenance, especially in type 2 diabetics, they see a reduction in symptoms and severity of their, hyperglycemia and issues associated with diabetes.
Okay. All right. So I've heard you describe obesity as a disease state. I thought obesity was just having a whole lot of excess adipose tissue. What am I missing?
So this sort of view has definitely been pervasive in society for a long time.
Right.
Again, just the try harder mentality. This is a result of something I've done wrong to lead to an accumulation of excess body fat or adiposity. But really, when you think about obesity at its core, it's less about the actual presence of body fat, but more what was happening under the hood, or continues to happen under the hood that led to that outcome, essentially.
So you're saying in part that the adiposity is a side effect or a result of the obesity disease state, not the state itself.
Right. I think that ultimately that's a more helpful way to look at that entire process. I think it is a bit reductionist in and of itself, but
Sure.
But it is very helpful to look at it that way. It's certainly not the only way to look at it, as we know that there are genetic components, there's environmental aspects to this, socioeconomic status makes a difference, and also just again the can't deny the fact that there are behavioral and psychological inputs as well.
Right.
So it's not just that, it's not just one of these things, but to understand at the outset, like you said, that the presence of the excess adiposity, let's say, is more of a symptom, more of a hallmark sign that obesity is occurring, more or less.
Okay. So, and the term gets used back and forth to describe both the adiposity and the disease state, and we're probably going to do the same thing. But at core, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it bad? Other than it has the side effect of creating all the extra adiposity, what does that matter?
Yeah. So the kind of to start, you look at one part that we sort of glossed over is how, another way to ask ourselves how this is happening. And so there's basically a chronic energy balance issue, a chronic energy balance mismatch. And so, I could hear somebody saying, well, now are you just boiling this down to calories in versus calories out?
Right.
Well, that is a component, and having a chronic energy surplus is ultimately how excess body fat or how weight accumulates.
Right.
But it is more than that. And so
what's driving the energy imbalance is the bigger question.
Exactly. And so that's where some of these genetic factors come in. Certainly our environment makes a big deal with how readily food is available to us as opposed to years in the past. And then it's ultimately this sort of feedback loop that then starts to occur because of this chronic surplus of energy, that then the actual presence of the adipose tissue in elevated amounts has its own set of effects that then it makes it that much harder to undo. So it's not just that it's there and you got to, eat less calories to get it off. It's just that there's pro-inflammatory elements and cytokines that the adipose tissue can excrete. And though that leads to a whole host of issues, and again, just makes it that much harder to treat.
So it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle to some extent.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and if I'm understanding right, because you're saying it's a disease state, because it's the adipose tissue is the side effect, that's why you can't just liposuction, 200 pounds off of somebody and have them be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Because the disease state is still present. And even if you could do that, it would reassert itself in a very limited amount of time.
Exactly. And I know that might even, just given what we're talking about, might even be kind of potentially counterintuitive at the same time, because it's like, well, isn't the presence of that body fat, isn't there going to be less to excrete these hormones and do these things and be dysregulated? But again, that is not addressing again the whole central aspect. So how is your brain responding to this? What are your leptin levels? How have those things changed by just cutting the fat off, so to speak, like a nice steak. It just doesn't do anything to address that.
Okay. Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why, in large part, the bootstraps idea of just go exercise and eat less isn't a holistic answer, because there's far more going on that doesn't address.
Right.
And the willpower neurological element of all of this is overwhelming. I mean, it's deeply ingrained in your biology at that point. You're not going to be able to just easily make those changes.
Right. And I know we have planned to talk more about the philosophical aspects of all this at a later time. But there is something that kind of just dawned on me, and I heard other doctors talking about this, and it's the idea that it also depends on the person that's in front of you as well. Like, you might have somebody very motivated, and if you come to them with the idea that this is a chronic disease, hey, this is a chronic disease, and this is going to be tough to treat. Have some grace, have some grace for yourself and all that sort of thing. Does that then tell the motivated person to take their foot off the gas? I mean, it's still very much about.
It's not to say don't eat less and exercise. Those are absolutely critical.
Right. And there's certainly a huge amount to be said about behavioral and psychological inputs to this. So you have that person who's very motivated. Yes, this is very much a chronic disease, but there are a million things you can actively do to combat this. It's not a helpless fight. But then on the flip side, you have the person who has been told their entire life that this is 100% their fault, and it's for a lack of discipline, and it's for a lack of caring, and it's because of this, and it's because of that. And all they had to do was, go to the gym more when they were younger, and all they had to do was lay off the processed foods and all. Just the very terse advice. To be able to frame it in such a way that, look, this is a chronic disease. This is very difficult to treat. Not only is it difficult to treat, but once you start to really flip this thing on its head, there are mechanisms ingrained in our physiology that then fight against the ability to then sustain any sort of meaningful weight loss. Wow. So it's, I just think it, depends on who we're talking to.
Yeah.
And just to kind of provide color on all sides of that.
Absolutely.